Most of the listeners of this podcast, and probably its host as well, are what you would call heavily online. We think about politics all the time. We are political junkies. But what do regular people, regular Americans who don't think about politics all the time, think about Donald Trump? Sarah Longwell is the publisher of the Bulwark, and she's also the host of the Focus Group podcast, which is a podcast dedicated to showcasing the regular voices from focus groups of Trump voters and swing voters. She talks to regular working Americans all the time in these focus groups, and I have her on the show today to talk about how regular voters think. What issues do they care about? What issues do they ignore? And what communication styles do Democrats need to learn if they're going to break through with these regular, everyday Americans? As always, thank you for listening to the podcast. If you want to like, subscribe, all of that is greatly appreciated. Go tell a friend, share it on social media. And if you really enjoy the podcast and you want to support the work that we do here at the Center for New Liberalism, please become a member. You can do that at cnliberalism.org/become a member. Join, get involved with the local chapter, get access to bonus episodes in our community Slack. All of that and more when you join. Thank you so much for listening and enjoy the episode. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the New Liberal Podcast, part of the Center for New Liberalism. I'm your host, Jeremiah Johnson, and joining me today is Sarah Longwell. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jeremiah. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. We're happy to have you. And I can only recommend to my listeners that the Focus Group podcast is really one of the most unique shows out there, I think. It's really, really valuable to listen to in a world filled with, 1,000 hot take artists, and everybody's got an opinion on the latest thing. And certainly you should listen to some of those people, especially me. But Sarah's podcast is unique in that it really does touch directly with voters. Every episode is hearing directly from voters, especially swing voters and Trump voters. Most of the episodes focus on. And it's really valuable for me to stay grounded because I guess by way to kind of kick off this conversation, it's hard for me sometimes because I'm someone who lives in the world of online discourse. Like, I'm so heavily online. I love to talk about politics. I think about it all the time, and I'm used to a particular way of talking about this and thinking about this. And I'm guessing a lot of my listeners are this way as well. They're also very online. But when you look at these focus groups, and you've been doing this for years now, they seem to talk about politics differently than the way us hyper online people do. What are the differences that you notice between how regular voters and online posters talk about politics?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest difference is just like regular people think about politics like one scintilla of the amount that you and I do. And I've just had so many, especially early on. This was one of the, I had a lot of scales fall from my eyes moments early on, which is why I started doing the work that I do, is because found it so valuable. And to hear directly from voters, as far as I'm concerned, voters are cheat code for politics, because what is democracy? What is politics? It's just a collection of the will of all of these people. It's about what they want. It's about how they interpret things. But man, I remember, okay, I'll just give you an example. I remember being in Columbus, Ohio, the day after Trump stood on the stage with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki. And this was a 5-alarm fire in Washington. Like, Republicans at the time, like Paul Ryan, like, they were watching decades of American foreign policy go up in smoke. And it was such a big deal that Trump actually, because what he did was he stood on stage with Vladimir Putin and he sided with Putin over America's intelligence community, who said that Russia interfered with the election. And it was such a conflagration in Washington that Trump actually reversed himself. He said, "Oh, I didn't say," the line at the time that he had said, "I don't know why it would be him," right? Meaning, I don't know why they would have, meaning Russia. And he said, "Oh, I misspoke. I meant, I don't know why it wouldn't have been him." But that was absolutely not what he said, right? He lied to sort of cover up the fact that everybody was freaking out about this. And I was so excited to go into this focus group because at the time I was thinking about how do we wrest the Republican Party back from Donald Trump? And I'm like, God, these voters are going to be so mad about this. Like, this is a huge moment. And I walked into the focus group and I asked two different groups, what did you think about Trump yesterday? And everybody was like looking at me, just staring blankly. And I was like, when he met with Vladimir Putin and did you guys have any thoughts about that? And everybody was just like, I don't know. Like, I it's good that he meets with world leaders. And I was like, okay, so they don't know what I'm talking about. Like this isn't even breaking through to them in any way. And so like that awareness for me of what we obsess about, like how there's a discourse every day online, is not the discourse that voters live in. And it's really interesting to me. And one of the reasons I love to listen to voters is just like, what is breaking through? What reaches a person for whom their main day is how am I getting my kids picked up? How am I paying for this? How am I going to my job? I got my big sports that I like. They have the things. And unless they are political junkies, they think about the other thing. I put this out the other day, but I was going into the Super Bowl. I was like, how right now millions of Americans are Googling which teams are in the Super Bowl because they're going to their party and they're trying to figure out, like, who do I root for? Like, what are
Mhm.
the weird reasons I might, root for the Seahawks over the Patriots? For me, it was that Robert Kraft is a bit of a Trumpy guy. And so I was like, I'm rooting against the Patriots and I'm rooting for the Seahawks. That is the way millions and millions of Americans do politics. They tune in late.
My favorite
Yeah.
stat along those lines, this is no longer quite as true, but in 2016, with Hillary versus Trump, I think like a month and a half before the election, when we've been in the middle of it for a while, and something like 20 to 30% of people still had not decided. They had no idea. It was, and again, it's not quite as true because Trump's been around for so long that he's now in people's heads, but like so many people just don't even pay attention or decide until late.
I cannot tell you how many people going into 2024 could not believe that Joe Biden was the nominee. Like, they were like, is he? He's running again? You sure? And I was like, no, he's going to be the Democrats. They're like, man, and like that is such an important thing to hold at your center when you are thinking about politics, when you are thinking about persuasion, is to know. And like, I also don't always know what's going to break through and what isn't. I know as a general theory on the matter, it is typically things that involve personal consequences for them. They tune in for those types of things. And so eventually they'll know about a shutdown if it's going to impact them in some way. Like, oh no, if the government shuts down, this thing happens in my life. But if it doesn't, they don't care that much. It's just annoying. People are always like, who will they blame? And I'm like, broadly the party in power, but it's difficult to say because they don't really tune in until checks stop coming. Or some other way, the zoo is shut down.
Yeah.
And then people are like, why are they doing this? And that is politics, right? You and I engage with this in an entirely different way than an average person.
I think it's very important, and I tell this to people that I know regularly, that we are the weird ones. We are the freaks
We are.
who think about this all the time. You might think like the guy who doesn't care about what's going on in the world, like that's a weird like, no, that guy's normal and we are the weird ones. But that makes it even more important to not isolate yourself, not put yourself in a bubble and actually understand how normal people think about politics, because there's a lot more of them than there are of us, and we live in a democracy.
That's
So
exactly right.
so that leads to the next kind of thing, which is, look, the broad story of the last year politically is that Trump has been accomplishing a lot of the things he wants to accomplish. He's been doing a lot of stuff, but politically, this has hurt him in general. His poll numbers are going down. They're declining in his second term faster than they did in the first term. What is your sense of why that's happening? Everybody has theories about this, but I view you as somebody with kind of a special, more direct kind of line to how people think. So what is your sense of like, what is actually causing the decline in Trump's approval ratings of all the many things he is doing?
Yeah, so this goes back to people who pay attention to politics and people who don't. So for us, we're always like, I don't know, does the East Wing break through? Does ICE break through? We're thinking about all the things and like, will this impact Trump? the number one thing, and it's like the more you know, the simpler it all gets. People care about the economy and costs. And when I say economy, this is really important. They're not following the GDP numbers. If you tell them like with a chart how things are going,
Joe the plumber is a big fan of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Sarah. That's what I think.
yeah, right? Like they're like not. They're not. But what they recognize, right, is when I say costs, I mean about everything. They mean healthcare costs. They mean the cost of housing. They mean the cost of groceries. And stupid people in politics, because we can't help ourselves, we try to figure out how we're going to talk about this to people. And so we just say like eggs. It's about egg prices. It's not about egg prices, right? That's a stand-in for affordability. And so sometimes people will come back and they'll be like, what are people complaining about? Eggs are now only this expensive. And you're like, it was never about eggs. It was never just about eggs. It was about their overall grocery bill in tandem with all the other cost drivers that combine like Voltron in their lives to increase the amount that they're paying for everything. And so people say like it's the economy, stupid, and that's just true, but it's also like the economy can be the stock market. Well, some of them are following the stock market, but for most people, they're just trying to get by, right? And so that's it. That's whether they can send their kid to summer camp or can they afford to feed their whole family. Like it's all of those things that are the close, and that's when people in our line of work that talk about kitchen table issues. But really, it just comes down to like, do people feel like they can get ahead? The cost of college, like all of this stuff is like the fact that college is out of reach for so many people now, just from an affordability standpoint. That's it. It's all of those things that come up. And so one of the things I do, getting a very focused group, ask the exact same question, have for 8 years. How do you think things are going in the country? Just an easy opener. And it's an open-ended question to hear what people bring up first. They never bring up abortion first. First of all, everybody thinks it's bad. Nobody thinks it's good. Thinks that things are going well. It's a little different in terms of partisans. Like a MAGA group, we're much more likely to say things are good than a Democratic group. But the swing voters think things are bad. Independents think things are bad. And when they talk about why, it's almost 100% related to their wallets. And this is like, I had a high school teacher, and he used to do this thing where he would be like, how do people vote? And he'd sort of turn around and show us his butt and like grab it. And what he meant was, it's their wallets. He was showing us his wallets in his back pocket. And that like remains true. It's like something I sort of,
It's an
always
odd way to put that, but
well, so I always remembered it because it was such a weird visual the way he did it, but it did imprint on me. But I had to like relearn this lesson by listening to voters, because it's suddenly you realize how acute this is for everybody and how much less they care about so many of the other issues and topics that we're talking about in Washington.
I think that's, yeah.
Anyway, so sorry, that is all to say that it is because Trump's central promise and the reason that so many people voted for him, despite the fact knowing he was a bad character and kind of a jerk, it was like, but he's kind of a businessman, and I think he's going to make the economy better. And so I just want to make one thing really clear, though. So when people say, well, do people care about the ballroom, like the demolishing of the East Wing? And I'm like, if they know about it and they know that Donald Trump is very invested in this idea of building a ballroom, he's like got his hands all over it. It's not that they care about the ballroom. It's that they care that he's focused on something that is not making the economy better for them. And so it's actually a contrast. And so when people are like, they're mad about the ICE agents with masks covering their faces because they're like, this isn't what I wanted you to do on immigration. Like this, Americans have a pretty clear sweet spot on immigration, which is they want a secure border. They want criminals deported. And for the people who've been here for 20 years and haven't committed any other crimes, they just want you to leave them alone. But like, the question isn't just that. It's like, why are you focused on that instead of focusing on this issue of costs? And so when you think about that contrast all the time, people care what the president is focused on, and they don't feel like he's focused on the right things.
This was the most predictable thing in the world to me, because what people really want is something to some degree is impossible, I think. They don't just want inflation to go down, and they want that. Don't get me wrong. The Democratic
just
Party
deflation and is actually bad for the economy, but
yeah. Well, that's what I'm getting to is, people got very justifiably angry at the Democratic Party, I think, because we had the highest inflation we've had since like the late 70s, early 80s. And you can argue, blah, blah, blah. There was a reason we had to go big so that COVID didn't lead to another Great Depression, blah, blah, blah. But like inflation was legitimately very high and the Democratic Party overshot it. But yeah, people don't want inflation to just go back to 2%. They want prices to reverse. And that's just not going to happen. It will never happen outside of like we're in the Great Depression is the only time that's really ever happened. And so they want something impossible. Trump was never going to be able to make, prices go back to where they were before. So it's a tough place to be in for any governing party. There was one thing I wanted to ask about to kind of add on to what you're saying. Like, I completely agree that the cost of living and the affordability crisis is like the big thing. The ICE crisis, what's going on in Minnesota, normally I kind of share the view with you that like it's very hard for things that are not the economy to really break through. But when I've kind of been canvassing places and people, that seems to have broken through in a way that a lot of other things haven't. Like I've noticed, crochet Instagram accounts talking about ICE in Minnesota. I've talked NBA Twitter accounts that have never posted anything political say like, hey guys, I never post about politics, but I need to say something about, like, across the spectrum of social media, which is mostly where I live, a bunch of completely apolitical people and accounts across all variety of platforms. This really seems to have broken through, at least from what I can see. Do you share that sense, or is this really only like you said, in contrast to the affordability crisis?
No, so there's the big picture, which I would say, like, I stand on that analysis that it is about affordability and it's the contrast of how Trump spends his time. Then there's sort of bespoke issues where you're like, oh, I'm surprised that this is bubbling up as it was. And there's two of those that are really bad for Trump. One is ICE, because they have shot Americans in the street. And the thing that has amazed me about that is everybody in the focus groups have seen the videos themselves. Like, it became such a thing, a little bit the way, like, remember when there was that meme going around where it's like, do you see a gold dress or a white dress or a blue dress? I can't remember what it was.
White and gold versus black and blue. Yeah.
Yeah, and so everybody kind of like does it to be like, I don't know, what do I see? These videos became sort of a Rorschach test for people where it's like everyone's arguing about it. And so everyone's sharing it and saying, like, this is my opinion of what this is. No, it was a good shoot. It wasn't a good shoot. That controversy has led it to break through in a way that many, many other issues don't. The second issue that has broken through to voters is Epstein. And so both of those are things where, and I am, in addition to doing the focus groups, like, my background is in communications and messaging. And so I always think about these things in, how do you tell a bigger story about what's happening? And the Epstein, for example, Epstein is part of a bigger story about your costs, because this is about Donald Trump and how he protects elites at the expense of the little guy. And he's protecting all these billionaires, the same people he's giving big tax cuts to, the same one he's dealing with on these corrupt practices, and they're doing a cover up to protect this elite cabal that was trafficking young girls. So, like, I just sometimes need Democrats to find how they think, oh, well, we shouldn't talk about Epstein because that's not a kitchen table issue. And I'm like, don't over internalize this to the point where you can't tell a complete story to people. These things do not exist in vacuums. And then the ICE issue is one of those where it's just like deeply emotional to watch Americans get shot in ways where people are already really uncomfortable with. The number one thing they don't like about ICE is the fact that they cover their faces. Like, they're just like, they don't look like regular police to me. Like, why is this happening? And like, even if people are like, yeah, that person was maybe being a loudmouth and they shouldn't get in the way, like, shouldn't deserve to be shot. That is not things that is one of those things that is a shock to the system, because people haven't really seen it before. Now, you may say, no, people have seen cops shooting Americans who fail to comply, or what, like, we have seen, or, like, you think about some of the big Black Lives Matter situations.
Yeah, and I think it's sadly it matters that both of them were white and both of
It
them
does
were
matter that they were both white.
middle-aged, middle-class white people who looked very respectable and had respectable jobs and families. And, like it shouldn't be as big of a deal as it is, but like that kind of thing, sadly, the optics matter.
Well, actually, they should all be big deals because I think for me, and this goes back to like what kind of Republican were you? I was always the kind of Republican who really disliked government power. Like I want to make sure that government, what it's with its enormous power, doesn't abuse that power. And so, like to me, this is like an outrageous abuse of power. Trump's sort of setting up his own paramilitary force. It's heavily funded. Um, and I will say this is just a slightly different topic, but like again, going to the storytelling piece, um, I think that it is good that Americans have gotten a nice, clear look at what this sort of paramilitary border patrol ICE is doing and how they're behaving, because I do think that Trump's ultimate designs for these agents is to have them near polling places, is to have people feel chilled going out in the streets, especially around elections. And I think that having Americans be deeply skeptical of this and sort of fearful of it. Has real benefits to driving down its approval and its sense of legitimacy among the American public so that Trump can deploy it less casually because people don't want it.
Now, one trap that I'm wary of falling into is, it's very fun sometimes to listen to your podcast, at least this year, maybe not in previous years, but as Trump's polling numbers have been going down and there are a lot of Trump voters or swing voters expressing regret, I'm a big lib. And it's fun to hear like people being like, I didn't vote for this. I'm uneasy with this. I don't like what he's doing. And this feels good to, me as a liberal. But I worry that I'm almost, only hearing what I want to hear, that I'm caught up in this, oh, Trump is doomed. Listen to his voters. And so I almost want to ask, like, as a way to correct my own cognitive bias, um, where do you think, listening to these voters, where is Trump and the MAGA movement still strong? Where are they still holding on to their base? Where do people still agree with them? What is still the core strength of Trumpism, of the modern Republican Party?
Oh, this is a great question. Because, one of the reasons I started the like podcast of it all, and I've actually been surprised that it's found, I expected it to be kind of a niche podcast for people like you. But I started it in part because I began tweeting about the focus groups. I was using the focus groups almost entirely for my own benefit, to understand where the public was so that I could build persuasion campaigns and do the stuff that I do. Um, but the thing that was, uh, so interesting to me is that just because people start to, but well, I started the podcast because I kind of want people to take their medicine. And so as a result, you get a lot of people who like are mad at the podcast. Like they're mad how people sound. They're mad at people's information streams, like for the things they're saying. They're mad that I don't correct them in the groups. And I'm like, no, everyone has to hear how average people are interpreting this information. And I'm extremely sympathetic to voters trying to make sense of this political moment because the information streams are so complicated. And one of the ways in which Republicans are incredibly strong is that Trump understood something about the new media environment. And by bypassing media gatekeepers and going right to people with his tweets in the first thing, by talking to the press so much, by holding so many gaggles, by holding so many press conferences, Republicans are absolutely better at communicating. And so, like, if you think about information as like you're on a placid lake and you like drop a big rock in it, you and I are standing in the first wave of that rock hitting. But most of the other people are standing by the shore just catching the little teeny waves that wash up of information. And Trump not only is better at creating stories that they kind of hear, but also he's dropping most of the rocks, like way more volume of rocks into that pond. And so we don't the Democrats have not yet figured out how they still rely on an outmoded media ecosystem, right? They tend to feel like, and that's why they complain about the media so much, right? Because the media right now is still attempting to be kind of a neutral arbiter, but they haven't built the kind of independent media equivalent of the right that makes the...
Yeah, there's the conservative media and there's the mainstream media.
Well, there's also the MAGA media, like the people that are just there to be like Benny Johnson has built his entire platform on just being like, did Trump say the word, testosterone? Well, that's the best word I've ever heard. And he has the most testosterone and I love him so, so much. An enormous audience for somebody just to tell them why Trump is good. And so like, that's one way, is that Trump himself was a better communicator, and he, in his wake, an ecosystem built up around him that was able to, where the conservative media already had like a 15-year head start, and then they like accelerated that. Because Fox News, everyone's like, well, it's because of Fox News. And I'm like, it's not just because of Fox News. It's because they've built a Rumble ecosystem, a Twitch ecosystem. They've got everything from like the National Review, which will carry a fair amount of water, but criticize them sometimes, all the way over to like the Nick Fuentes and the America First and Laura Loomer and these massive influencers. And they fight with each other and they create soap opera conditions that, reel people in. And like, I just listen to so many young men talk about Nick Fuentes, and it's not that they're like, I love white supremacist stuff. It's that Nick Fuentes talks about like being a chud who can't get a woman, and he's ugly, and like whatever. And like young men are like, it's funny. Like I do this, and then like he throws in the anti-Semitic stuff, and they're not there necessarily for that, but then it seeps into them anyway. So I just think there's like a massive communications asymmetry that they are doing a much better job of building more of as the traditional media environment fractures. I also think that they've got a couple things. I think it was Ezra Klein that said this, but whoever said it, it made its way to me and it is cemented in my brain as a real thing, which is that Trump won the culture by more than he won the popular vote. And I think that right now they're sort of overreading that mandate, but the extent to which you talk to young people who are Black, who are Hispanic, women, whatever, who hate the sort of DEI woke stuff, where there's a real backlash to it. People just don't like to be put in boxes. They don't like the way Democrats talk about things. They don't understand why the pronouns thing is such a deal. I mean, I just listen to progressives talk about this. Like I'll get like a Black lesbian from Atlanta being like, why the pronouns? Why are we doing all of this? I hate it. And so I think that Democrats have kind of lost their hold on the culture somewhat. And then on the...
Well, and this is a thing that's been bubbling for a while, right? Where like, when I was growing up, and probably when you were growing up too, to me, when I think about like who is a political scold, I used to think about Republicans, the moral majority, the finger wagging people about violent video games and, rap music is, polluting the minds of our children. And like, it used to be that Republicans were the scolds. They were the nags. They were the ones who were uncool and wanting to stop you from doing the edgy things that you wanted to do as a teenager. And at some point that flipped, right? And I think you're in a bad position as a political party. Maybe not an impossible position, but a bad position if you are the party that is seen as the scold.
Yes.
I think it's just not something you want to be.
Or even, I gotta say, one of the things that just I think about all the time is how Democrats have sort of done this weird thing where they think they've decided that to be more inclusive, you do things like land acknowledgements, you do things like pronouns, and they feel like this is more inclusive. What they don't realize is how exclusive it is, because it is a kind of intra or like in-group language. And so like I always say to people this, I'm like, if your pronouns are in your email, you have told me very little about your gender identity. You've told me a lot about your politics. And so I do think that is one of the places where Democrats are like kind of in trouble. Like people are not with them on this. And then the second thing is immigration. Like Trump built everything on... Like building the wall was not like a real policy proposal. It was a vibe, which is why Republicans are mad at him that he didn't build a literal wall. It was a stand-in for Trump taking immigration seriously, which people wanted immigration to be taken seriously. And this is something, going to a previous question, when you're talking about like, where is the Republican Party still strong? There's a part of me that wants to be like, that's kind of the wrong question. It's like, where are Democrats so weak? And one of the places that they're so weak is on not having an affirmative stated position on immigration that allows people to say, Oh, I know what Democrats think about immigration because otherwise they just say, well, it's open borders. They just have an open borders policy. Joe Biden, and he didn't do enough about the border. Like, this is a real problem for Democrats. And like I said, Americans, and this again is a story. Immigration isn't just about immigration. It is a story about crime. It is a story about drugs. It is a story about economics and whether or not people feel like someone else is taking something that should be theirs. And so it's like Trump told the whole story when he says they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime. It wraps around and it tags into things that people are already anxious about, and basically gave them someone to blame. And Democrats can stake out a different position that is, hey, we're going to do order without cruelty. Like, we recognize that we've got to have a secure border, and they should start with that. And they're like, but also, we don't think people who've been paying taxes here for 20 years should be like dragged out of their homes by masked agents from Trump's paramilitary. Like, there's a world in which
Yeah.
Democrats should contrast with Trump's excesses. But if they go back to just not having an immigration policy, that is a huge weakness for them.
And as you said, it's not that hard to triangulate where the regular person is here. You know, that they don't want they want the border to be under control. They want criminals deported, but like, you know, the idea of masked agents dragging people weeping out of their homes is deeply disturbing. But all this kind of gets to a larger question of, you know, you're someone with a communications background, right? Comms and strategy. And I worry, or not worry, but I think a lot, I should say, about what kind of messaging style and what kind of communication style works. Because, you know, you can debate whether or not, you know, how much of this is going to come down to specific policies versus how much of this is like the general vibe of things. You know,
Yes.
build the wall a real policy, or is it a vibe? A little bit of both, but
A little bit of both.
in years of hearing from voters in this format, what is your sense of like the kind of messages or communication styles that work? And what do people inside of politics who are kind of deep inside the machine miss when they think about how to communicate with voters?
Yeah, so there's a few things. Number one, if I was in charge of all Democrats, I would be like, I want you to go to your staffs, and I want you to tell them that of every speech you give, it should be 75-25 in favor of economic issues. Like, 75% of it should be like ways I'm going to materially improve your lives. And that's like the number one change I would make, is like, because even then it would like crowd out a bunch of the stupid stuff that I think the machine tells you, well, go talk about this. But it's like, no, we're gonna talk about economics and affordability the vast majority of the time. Two, we are always going to start on immigration with a secure border. Like, telling people that a secure border is table ante in this country. We have to know who's in the country. We just have to know who's here. We want people to come here and be part of be part of this economy. We can make our lives better. There's a lot of ways to talk to people, especially older folks, about how, like, if we deport all of these people, like, home health care workers are going to be in really short supply, and we should find a path to citizenship for people who work in that field, who've been here for a long time. Like, there are ways to triangulate on that, but a lot of it is just stylistic. I would say Democrats, they're like hearing the message that people want them to talk more directly, and they've decided that what they should do is make their own like TikToks and their own Instagram things, straight to camera, go right to voters, and that's okay. But I would say the guardrails of our culture right now are what is cringe. And I think a lot of the Democrats' communication style veers into a kind of cringe that is actually like, one of the things that I just think about with Democrats a lot now, working with a lot of them, is how much they do have to poll, focus group, and test everything to death before someone will move forward with a message. And I'm like, I am begging you guys, like, by the lapels, just what do you care about? Like, what, just talk to someone like it's normal. There's no magic words. There's only one magic word, in fact. But like, Democrats will often be like, well, Sarah, how should I talk about this? Like, what words should I say? I'm like, there's no words. Like, what do you think? What do you think on trans athletes? Like, what's your personal opinion? Tell me how you'd talk about it, and just talk about like a human being. And some of it is just like unlearning voters now. This is a big difference in the way in voters. Every single day, they are looking at people's faces on their screens, talking to them. And so they can sniff out people talk about authenticity now as kind of a watchword, but like they can just tell when you're talking to them like a regular person and when you're trying to sort of spin them or do political speak or kind of doing cringe performance art. And so like I think that it's just a matter of kind of unlearning some of those political instincts and talking. And sometimes Democrats do this by they're like, well, I'm going to swear when I talk, and that's going to make me feel authentic. And I'm like,
you know who
it's
doesn't
not just
swear?
that. Who?
You know who I've never seen swear?
Barack Obama?
Well, I was going to say Zohran Mamdani.
Yeah, sure.
And I feel like a lot of Democrats have learned valuable lessons from him, but also some incorrect lessons, and that like they want to ape the wrong things that he's doing. Where really what he's doing is he does have very well produced social media, but he also just hammers affordability. You know, Andrew Cuomo in that race was talking about Zohran's going to lead to anti-Semitic pogroms and ISIS, and Zohran was like, I want you to have free buses. Like, what's going to resonate with New Yorkers? You know, it was very basic stuff. He was authentic, and he talked about lowering costs. That was pretty much it. You know, like
yeah. And you know how else he did it? Like the thing about Zohar on social media is it had regular people in it all the time. It wasn't like sitting in an office, like pontificating. He was like sitting on the subway, talking to somebody else, being like, this is what's really expensive for you. And that makes people feel heard and listened to. What does anybody want? Any human? They want to feel seen. They want to feel connected. We have a loneliness crisis. We have a trust crisis. How do you make people trust you? How do you make them feel seen? You talk to them. You talk to them. And so like part of, people, when we talk about Joe Biden's age, I was telling people all the time, people who actually listen to the podcast will hear me all going into 2024 going, everybody think Joe Biden is way too old. And it led to, though, a massive communications problem, not because Joe Biden was too old to be a good communicator. He was too old to be somebody who could go out there and be like, here's how you should think about the economy, not as Bidenomics and not as everything's fine because a chart said so. It's about saying to people, we're sitting on top of the best recovery post-COVID of any other country, but we are not finished. We are not done. Like you guys are still feeling it way too much. Your costs are not nearly low enough. Like this post-COVID environment is tough, but we've made these great strides. Let me talk to you about them. And let me lay out a vision for where we're going. Without talking to people all the time like that, they just feel gaslit. Like that was the thing that people were mad at Biden about the economy, not just that the economy was high, but that they were telling them actually the economy was good because they're like, it doesn't feel good. And I feel I'm angry about how they're talking about it.
So I know that you've got to head out soon, but I'm going to ask the traditional final question that we always ask on this podcast. And that is, where can people go to learn more? I will, of course, recommend the Focus Group podcast and the great work that everyone does at the Bulwark. The Bulwark is a fantastic resource. Everybody should subscribe. But in addition to your own work, obviously, if people want to be able to get in touch more with regular voters to break outside their bubbles, how would you recommend that they do that?
Well, this is tough actually because we are both algorithmically sorted, we are geographically sorted, or generationally sorted in a lot of ways. Like people are living in different information ecosystems now, and that's not news to anybody. But when you listen to voters, it just becomes so clear the different media ecosystems people are living in and how much that impacts what information they have. Um, it's hard to say things like, I mean, it's why I started putting the focus groups into the podcast because I was like, no, people have to hear how people talk, and understand what information they have. I would say like it's a it's not just about learning. That's about like learning where they can find out more and listen to more people. But like the number one way you can do that is like talk to people who don't think the way you do. Like talk to people who are not sorted, and like try to do it more with an open. If you approach it with curiosity, so that you can hear what they're saying, it's just like a learning experience for like, oh, I know how they got this information. I know that they're living like the media ecosystem on the right isn't just an ecosystem. Like they have done world building. Like you can live in that world and that information ecosystem. And so like the thing that I tell people, like, what can you do? I'm like, put a quarter in the machine, be a voice. Like the other side is overwhelming. The machine that creates the information, that is the vibes, that is like the downstream of those ripples. And so like be a part of that. Like, everyone's like, well, do I just donate to a political campaign? I'm like, no, you go be a voice. You talk about how Trump's economy is bad. Like, you can be part of this. And it's not that hard. Like, and I hate to tell people, like, use more social media, but I'm like, let your objections
Just
put 'em
never
out
log
there.
off. Never log off. The
Never log
official
off.
advice of Sarah Longwell, publisher of the Bulwark. Well, I do want to say thank you one more time to my guest today, and hopefully this has been interesting for our listeners. Thank you, Sarah Longwell, for coming on the show.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me.